It's La Decima. Welcome to episode number 10 of the Backup Punter Podcast. My name is Keegan Matheson, and today we're looking at fantasy football running backs, the LA relocation story, extra point changes, Michael Sam in the CFL, and I'll tell you a story about how I spent 1 hour yesterday convinced that Marcus Mariota had been traded. Stay tuned for that one. So thank you again for joining the Backup Punter Podcast. As always, you can check us out on Twitter at the Backup Punter or visit thebackuppunter.com. And this show is brought to you by DynastySportsEmpire.com. So whether it's NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB, Dynasty Sports has got you covered on the fantasy side. So check them out today at DSE_football. Join a startup Dynasty Fantasy Football League today. They start at $50. If you're into fantasy football, this is the next level. So check them out. And thank you again for joining, and I teased it off the top. I'm going to lead you into this episode with a story, and it's one that I got a kick out of because it's at my own expense. Now, yesterday, I'm at work, and let's all keep in mind that on draft weekend, I guess it's just over a month ago now, NFL draft weekend, there was that story, a three-way rumor between Tennessee, Cleveland, and Philadelphia. The rumor was that Philly would use Cleveland's 12th and 19th picks to slingshot up to number 2 to take Marcus Mariota. Keep that in mind throughout this story. I was at work. I had my iPhone in my back pocket listening to a podcast. I'm technically challenged. I used a 45-year-old BlackBerry up until about a year ago, and I'm still getting the hang of this iPhone world. Now, however it happened, I didn't lock my iPhone, so it was getting pressed in my pocket. It got into my iCloud settings. Who knows what a cloud is? I don't. Regardless, it messed up my settings somehow. I spent the rest of the day fiddling with it. I couldn't get it fixed. So I reset the settings on my iPhone. Didn't lose anything. I just reset my settings to default. No problem. Well, somehow it reset my cloud. And I have one friend who is a cloud contact instead of a text message contact. I don't know how that works, but they show up as their name at iCloud. Yada yada. You know more about it than me. So when I reset, my conversation with them got a red exclamation mark on it, which I read as, oh, it's a new text message. Not, that, oh, just pay attention to this. It's your cloud conversation. Check this out. So I thought that it was a new message. And I open up my phone and I read, wow, if this three-way rumor between Tennessee, Philly, and Cleveland is true, that would be nuts. I panic. I don't look at the date on the text. I thought I just got it. So I text back and I say, oh my God, is it Marcus Mariota? But then I had to get back to work for an hour. So I put my phone back in my car, went back to work. I spent 1 hour absolutely panicking that there was a three-way blockbuster about to go down. I wasn't home to write about it. That hour took about 6 weeks in my brain. I finally get back to the car and my friend said, what are you talking about? And I just tricked him into getting excited. What do you mean there's a Marcus Mariota trade? I looked up at the date and it was April 25th. And that was a very disheartening feeling. It was a day of highs and lows, that's for sure. But that's how my day went yesterday. So for an hour, I thought this was going to be a much more interesting podcast. But we've still got a lot to talk about today. And we'll start with a few of the smaller stories before we move into a look at fantasy football running backs, because there's a ton of talk about there. And I want to start out with the relocation story in LA. Now this is getting interesting. As we all know, Oakland and San Diego, they seem to be teaming up, aligning to move into a joint stadium. And for those of you who don't stay up to date with this, because it does get business-like, it gets legal, it's not really the fun and games of a draft or free agency. So it seems to be that Oakland and San Diego are aligned to make a joint stadium. That's one plan for Los Angeles. The other plan is St. Louis Rams, owner Stan Kroenke. They've got an 80,000-seat, $2 billion stadium in Inglewood, about 10 miles from downtown Los Angeles. They've got a plan to do that. Right now, it's looking like the Oakland and San Diego plan is the one building steam, though. Now, they've got 170 acres in Carson. A $1.7 billion venue is proposed. Now, they're planning to go there together if both of their cities will not renew their leases or will not help them make a new stadium. It's the ultimate power play because both San Diego and the Raiders are saying, well, we have a better option. We have something we can go to. We're not roped into San Diego. We're not roped into Oakland. And I think this is fantastic. I really do. I love the San Diego Chargers. I have a good friend that's a big Chargers fan, so I've gotten exposed to them more than most people, especially someone on the East Coast. We barely see any Chargers games. But the Chargers are an exciting team. They have Melvin Gordon now. Melvin Gordon said just before the NFL draft, if he could play in one place, it would be Los Angeles. But then he made a joke, well, that's not possible. Hell, it might be now. But they've got Phillip Rivers, Keenan Allen, Denzel Perryman, one of my favorite players in this whole league now at inside linebacker. He was my dark horse for Defensive Rookie of the Year because I think he's going to rack up tackles. This is an exciting team. I think the powder blue jerseys are awesome. 99 out of 100 of you will disagree with me. I don't care. I think they're fantastic jerseys. But San Diego, they don't have a booming market. It's an okay market, but they don't have just a diehard fan base around there, so this makes sense. For Oakland's a little bit different for me because I love the Oakland Raiders. I love Al Davis. As much of a nut as he was, he represented different thinking. He represented the other side of the coin that you rarely ever get to see in the NFL. He sued the NFL. He was the just win baby lunatic that everyone else was afraid to be, but secretly wanted to be. I think he was one of the best things to ever happen to professional football. And those old 70s and 80s Raiders teams, man, they were fun. They were half cheating, half violent, but full of big personalities, and it's because of that they built such a strong connection with their community. Now, the LA Raiders have existed before. And what I love about the LA Raiders, I don't want to see Oakland lose the Raiders, because the Oakland Raiders fan base is as diehard as you'll find. Unfortunately, this is a municipal, a money issue. But the LA Raiders represented something. Even if a lot of you hear LA Raiders and you think of an NWA rap music video, or you think of, it was so closely related to hip-hop culture. That's what it was tied to. Even if you don't love that, it still represented something, and I love that. Nothing I like less than a team that is just a team. It's not enough to just be a team. That's why I love a team like the Green Bay Packers. They represent a small community, the smallest community in pro sports. And like their small community, they aren't the big rich spender. They draft, develop, keep their own people. They're homegrown, just like Wisconsin is. I like a team that operates in that way, that represents their area, that represents their part of the map in the NFL world. And I think the Oakland Raiders do that well enough right now. Their lack of success has really torpedoed them over the past few years. Some disgusting mismanagement, really. But put them in LA, I think that would be fun. That would spark the franchise. And if you don't think that Los Angeles can handle two teams, you're crazy. They absolutely can. They absolutely can do it. That's America. It's starved for football. Now, I had a great question over Twitter from a friend of the show, Ryan Andrews. Now, he asked, which 5 cities would I like to see a franchise go to? So I'll exclude LA here, and I'll exclude London because that's just a terrible idea. You don't want to travel overseas for 8 road games a year. Nobody wants to go live in London away from everyone they've ever known. Just London, as an international series, sure. But I hope we can just put the fork in any expansion to London talk for good. Please. My 5 cities that I want to look at. First, I will go out of the country, though. I'll go out of the country twice here. Mexico City, Mexico. The market is there, the money is there, the fans are there. Roger Goodell has recently expressed interest in going back to Mexico for either a preseason game or, part of the international series. That is a market that we don't talk about enough. Would it work? I don't know, but it's one that you can't forget about. So keep Mexico City on the brain. Another one's San Antonio. That would be another Texas team, but Texas can handle it, and Texas loves football. San Antonio, one of the larger cities in the United States. You don't hear much about it outside the San Antonio Spurs in terms of pro sports. The market's there, I think. Another would be Portland, Oregon. They've got they support their basketball team. Oregon Ducks college football is one of the most passionately supported football programs in this country. Or I should say in that country as a Canadian, sorry. But the sport fandom in Portland around Oregon is fantastic. I think they could absolutely support an NFL franchise. And they'd have that football stadium there to act as a kind of a cushion until they built a new one. One more would be Oklahoma City. Well, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the basketball team, they've done okay. But Oklahoma City, this is another place. I think they're just inside the top 30 populations in the United States. It's there. The fans would be there. The money would be there. Another one of these places. There's all of these B-level places like Oklahoma City, San Antonio. They really could work. But the one place that I want, and this is biased, is Toronto, Canada. Toronto population is roughly 2.5 million, we'll say it is, to ballpark. It would be one of the bigger American cities if it were American. Now, unfortunately, what I think has happened is that the Bills and Toronto series kind of torpedoed any chance of Toronto getting a team soon. Well, the Bills and Toronto series was terrible. I think it was 2012. I made the trip up to see the Bills play the Seattle Seahawks, which was fantastic. Russell Wilson rushed for 3 touchdowns. And let me just push up my thick rim glasses here and be a dirty football hipster. But I think that was before everyone caught on to Russell Wilson being good. Not that I knew he was good then, but I remember seeing him and thinking, oh wow, this isn't just a short guy that beat out Matt Flynn. This guy can play. And it was a great game. But they played the games at the Rogers Centre. For those of you who don't know, that's where the Toronto Blue Jays MLB team plays. And back in the day, the Rogers Centre was just this beacon of technical, engineering innovation. It had the retractable roof. But this place is a morgue. It was, the stadium was not full. And you could talk to people around you just as loud as I'm talking to you right now on this podcast. It's just a terrible venue. It was an empty venue. Now the game, the football, the experience was fantastic. One of the funniest experiences of my entire life. Do you remember, I'm not sure how you say the name, Psy, the guy that had the Gangnam Style song? He was the halftime show then. And it wasn't a halftime show. I remember I was excited to see, wow, what other songs does this guy do? He walked out with 3 women on each arm, so 6 women abreast, walked out to the stage, did Gangnam Style, and left. It was a 3-minute performance, and it was absolutely beautiful. It was a transcending moment of art. It was fantastic. But for the game, the city itself, the pieces are there in Toronto. God, the pieces are there. Their CFL team, the Toronto Argonauts, they're barely a Pop Warner football team. They're a disaster. They just moved out of the Rogers Centre to play on a soccer field. But if you did it right, Toronto would be a great market. And Toronto is a city that people would want to play in, unlike London. So that's what I think about that. Now, I want to touch on these extra point changes, the rule changes. There have been some other tinkering with rule changes, but I want to talk about extra point because this is the one I have a problem with. Now, the new rule is that people will be kicking the extra point after a touchdown from the 15-yard line instead of the 2-yard line. I think that this is change for the sake of change, and I don't like that. Now, I'm an NFL purist. I cringe at the thought of an 18-game season because then that weakens records. I love the thrill of a 5,000-yard passing season. I love the thrill of someone chasing 2,000 yards or 1,800 yards. I don't want any of those to lose their importance. I want everything to stay the same numbers-wise, stats-wise. Modernize the game in terms of safety, concussion protocol, things like this. Please, absolutely. There's not enough that you can do for that. But in terms of things that impact points, that impact counting numbers, the yardage, touchdowns, I just really don't like that. And what the problem I have with extra point changes, from the 2-yard line, an extra point, that's a 99% deal. You're going to make it pretty much every time. Moving it back to the 15-yard line, taking a field goal from there, that's still made 95% of the time. 95%. With teams practicing it as the extra point now, I can see that growing to 96, 97. Because it's just a little chip. My problem with that is that it means if someone misses it, it's just by chance. You're only missing this by chance. It's not because you're trying to make a long field goal and you failed to miss it. Any misses from the 15-yard line will just be because a botched snap. The kicker slips a little bit. And I don't like that. If you're going to change it enough so that skill needs to determine hits and misses. Put it to a point where kickers would only make 85% of it. Put it to a point where if a kicker made every extra point that game, that would actually be considered a good game. If they went 5 for 6, that would be, okay, well that's a normal game of extra points. I don't like it being at this place where, if a kicker goes 29 for 30 on extra points in a game, that's still a crappy game, because they missed one. How do you miss an extra point? Moving it to a place that's going to be 95 or 96% just isn't worth it. It's change for the sake of change, and a couple of NFL players have very wisely made the point that this is dangerous to the offensive linemen blocking for kickers. Now you see guys like Troy Polamalu started the craze jumping over the line, but Cam Chancellor really got into it last year, especially in the playoffs, timing it and jumping over the line. Being offensive linemen or blockers on a kick, it's a dangerous job. You're not just standing there. You have other players on the defensive side of the ball swarming around you trying to block this kick. They get a running start at you standing still. If you have a guy lined up with their hand in the dirt that you need to engage, then there's somebody trying to jump over top of you. That sounds a lot like an injury to me. I'm not saying there's going to be bodies all over the field, but that might result in 1 or 2 more injuries over the year. What if it's your star guard? Something like that. Now, this is me being worrisome. This is me being a nervous parent watching my kid right now, but I don't see how the change is worth it. But I want you to disagree with me on this one. Does this make sense to you? Do you think this is just a small step? Now, I was listening to the Grantland NFL podcast yesterday, which is a great podcast. I recommend you check that one out too. One of their hosts had an idea where after a touchdown, you could go for 1 point from the 2-yard line. This is not kicking at all. You'd run a play from the 2-yard line for 1 point, or from the 10-yard line for 2 points. That's eliminating the kick altogether, which again makes the NFL purist in me think, oh, come on. But that's a damn interesting idea, don't you think? Adding some level of choice to it. But putting it to a point where you're still going to make 19 out of 20 at worst, that's not enough change. So we'll see what coaches do. Hopefully, coaches will overreact to this and start to go for 2 more, and Tim Tebow will take over the league. But we'll see. Now, lastly, before we talk about fantasy football running backs, I just want to touch on Michael Sam. The defensive end signed a contract in the CFL with the Montreal Alouettes, which I think is absolutely fantastic. Now, part of it that bugged me is that every headline you saw that day was not Michael Sam defensive end signs, it was Michael Sam, who came out as openly gay, or gay defensive end Michael Sam, gay this, gay that. At this point, talking about it in that sense is not furthering the conversation. That is limiting Michael Sam, and I don't agree with that. And I tweeted that out on Twitter, and I got a kick out of it because some of my followers, assuming I was American, I guess, continued to say, make that a problem about my country. They would say, well, that's just how your country needs to make everything. And I'd laugh and say I'm Canadian, and we all got on quite well. But it's, is it a clickbait thing? I don't know. But that needs to be left out of it now. Michael Sam's a football player, and he's a damn good football player. He was the Defensive Player of the Year in one of the toughest conferences in the United States. Division I. He performed. I don't care if he's purple. I don't care if he has 7 legs. We've had that discussion. Let's finally move into the point where we just discuss him as a football player. There are probably dozens and dozens of gay men in the NFL. Whether you want to admit it or not, it's probably the truth. And to be honest, I think that when the St. Louis Rams drafted Michael Sam in round 7, there were 10 or 12 front offices around the league that let out a sigh of relief. The NFL got off a bit easy on the Michael Sam situation because the Rams drafted him. But don't just group all 32 teams into this. 32 teams didn't draft Michael Sam. I think there were a lot of teams that wouldn't have touched him, unfortunately. And that upsets me, but this is, it's the world we live in. We live in, 1965 sometimes. But I wish Michael Sam the best of the luck in the CFL, and I think this league is made for him. Now, for any American listeners, the CFL, bigger field, 12 players aside, 3 downs, passing oriented, and it's good for tweeners, these defensive end linebacker tweeners like Michael Sam. I think he'll be playing strictly defensive end in the Alouettes. But this is what Michael Sam needs, and this highlights a big need in pro football. Michael Sam doesn't have combine numbers. He had a bad combine. He showed up at the Veterans Combine this season, had a bad combine again. But that's not where he's going to test out. He's going to test out on the football field. But for players that don't make it into the NFL, it's so hard to find a serious field of competition. You don't want to go to the Arena League. People aren't looking there that closely. And this brings up one of the most interesting conversations in sports to me, which is a developmental league for the NFL. Now, I'm not saying we should fire up NFL Europe again by any means, but there's a gap there where players like Michael Sam get lost. Thankfully, Michael Sam has landed in the CFL. I hope more teams do this. Keep in mind Cameron Wake of the Miami Dolphins. He was a tweener. Was he a defensive end, linebacker? I don't know. Went to the CFL, put up 20-plus sacks. Now he's a star in the league. Is Michael Sam going to do that? I don't think so. I don't know. But this is what he needs. This is a chance to put game tape together. This is a chance to give NFL teams an opportunity to visualize him hitting a quarterback. It's a CFL quarterback, sure, but it brings some reality to his game because his 40-yard dash, his bench press, that's not enough anymore. And I think he'll do just great. So you're listening to the Backup Punter Podcast here. This is episode number 10, La Decima. So thank you again for joining. You can find it on iTunes, on Stitcher, so subscribe there. Give it a nice rating if you would. And I really appreciate you coming back each and every week. And I do encourage you to reach out with any questions you do have on the show. As long as it's reasonable, as long as it's football related, I'll always feature it. I'll always use it as a discussion point. Just leave your name if you don't have your name in your Twitter profile. And I'd love to get to it on the show. So now for the back half of the show here, I want to talk about fantasy football running backs. And over the next few weeks, I'm going to go position by position and give an early off-season look. I'm not going to come out and do rankings right now because what the hell's the point doing rankings right now? By August, when you do your draft, someone's going to break a leg, someone's going to come out of nowhere. But I want to have the conversation just to get it going in your brain because I don't care how far away the season is. It's over 100 days away still. But I'm in fantasy football mode already. I've got my rosters up. I'm looking at my keepers. And I want to get that conversation going. Now, I've been listening to a lot of fantasy football podcasts this week, especially ones that are, some bigger ones that focus solely on fantasy football. And I'm really, really rubbed the wrong way by the arrogance that surrounds fantasy football now. Where if you are not a complete football nut that knows fantasy inside and out, you're almost a nuisance. It's just, oh, you filthy commoner. You villager, get out. I mean, when did fantasy football turn into, it's like sabermetrics, advanced statistics in the MLB. People use fantasy football as a way to be more right than somebody, just as a high horse thing. And come on. Fantasy football it's fun, damn it, okay? Enjoy it. And when I talk about fantasy football here, don't get caught up in categorizing, labeling everything. Because on a lot of these shows, you'll see, oh, this guy's a wide receiver 3. No, he's not. He's a wide receiver 4. Well, where the hell do you draw the line? And in some leagues, you're going to have 8 teams. I'm in a league with 8 teams, and I'm in a league with 12 teams. One of those leagues has massive rosters. We have 4 or 5 receivers, a couple flex. The other team is just standard. We talk about fantasy football in the sense that everybody is in the same size league with the same size people. Whereas most of us are just in the league with our buddies that we love. Maybe we throw in $20 on it and have a good time through the year. So when you hear rankings through the off season, don't let yourself get caught up in the, looking down their nose at you. This guy's a wide receiver 1. No, he's a 2. Forget that. Just focus on who's better than who and make your own rankings. Don't be robotic. If you like a guy, draft him around early. Who cares? Believe in a guy. Be that person in your league who finds Odell Beckham because you didn't listen to the quote unquote draft experts. Be that guy that makes a bold pick. Don't be an idiot, but you know what I mean. So ESPN released their top 300 players just last week. And check out the list. It's early for rankings, but it's really fun to get the noodle going with these things. And I want to talk about running backs first, because they are the most interesting group. Wide receivers the deepest by far. I can't wait to talk about that group. I'll need a week-long show. But running backs the most interesting. Because all of us can look at these running backs and make our own top 10 that we'd be happy to get anyone from. Now, at the top of the list, everyone's top 6 will probably be Eddie Lacy, Le'Veon Bell, Adrian Peterson, Jamal Charles, Marshawn Lynch, Arian Foster. That's 6. Now, out of these next 6, all of us can pick 4, I think, to fill out our top 10. C.J. Anderson, Matt Forte, LaShawn McCoy, DeMarco Murray, Jeremy Hill, Alfred Morris. Out of those guys, I'd probably pick Forte, McCoy, Murray, and Hill. Not too sure about Morris yet. Not too sure about C.J. Anderson yet. I'll get back to that. But that gives you 10 guys who I think are legitimate top running backs on your team. You're going to draft that guy, and he's going to be your horse that hopefully grabs you 15, 20 a week. And that's what you need from your RB1 on your roster. One of the most interesting things about the ESPN Top 300, Eddie Lacy was the number 1 player overall. And if you know anything about me, you know I love Eddie Lacy. I love me some Eddie Lacy. But that surprised me, and I might argue a bit against it. And since it's coming from me, you know I really believe in it if I'm going to argue against my boy Eddie Lacy. I think the reason Eddie Lacy's above Le'Veon Bell, obviously, is because Le'Veon Bell is suspended for the first 3 games of the year because he had a bunch of dope on him and he didn't know anything about laws. If Le'Veon Bell was playing all 16, he'd be number 1. Easy. And I've seen a lot of mock drafts where Adrian Peterson goes above Lacy as well, where Marshawn Lynch, where Arian Foster goes. Again, these top 6 guys, it's up to you. You can't really make if you pick any of these 6 guys, I'm not going to call you wrong, because you've got a point with all of them. But let's focus on Lacy versus Bell here. I wrote an article about this for NFLSpinZone.com from the Lacy perspective. With Le'Veon Bell, I think you can still draft him over Eddie Lacy and be happier by the end of the season. You're going to be without Le'Veon Bell for weeks 1, 2, and 3. So let's look at what Eddie Lacy would give you in that time. Well, Eddie Lacy, his career he's a bad starter. He starts out slow. In, I think, 7 career games, 6 or 7 career games in September, he only has 212 yards. Mike McCarthy, the coach of the Packers, he doesn't use Eddie Lacy like many assume. Many see Eddie Lacy's body and think, oh, there's that workhorse that goes 25-30 a game. Eddie Lacy barely ever goes over 20 carries in a game. That means he slowly gets built up through the season. Late November, he really turns it on. If the Packers were running him like a horse, he'd get hot in September, but they build him up. They protect him. So for those 3 games that you'd be without Le'Veon Bell, why can't you grab a D'Angelo Williams, who will be starting for the Steelers? Why can't you grab just a back-end guy, a Frank Gore, someone like this to fill in, and then roll with Le'Veon Bell, who's going to come back with fresh legs? Hopefully without weed on his person. Because Le'Veon Bell is just a workload phenomenon. He's going to, even playing 13 games, he'll get 50, 60 catches. He'll out-receive Eddie Lacy, I think. Now with Eddie Lacy, his ceiling might be 1,200 rush yards, about 40 catches. Keep in mind last year that his receiving numbers were inflated by the fact that Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb were the offense. There wasn't much tight end play, wasn't much third receiver input in that offense. So the coverage was cushioned, dropped back on Cobb and Jordy Nelson, which left Eddie Lacy just open in the middle. He had a lot of receptions, over 40, 42 I think it was. Now I watched every snap the Packers played. These weren't beautiful routes that he ran. They were just dump-offs. Aaron Rodgers doing the classic Brett Favre little underhand flick to Eddie Lacy in the middle of a crowd. So I don't know if he goes any higher than that. I think Eddie Lacy's near his ceiling. Whereas Le'Veon Bell, especially if you're in a keeper league, Le'Veon Bell, these receptions are just so valuable. They're so valuable. And Le'Veon Bell, his inclusion in that passing game means that he's never out of the offense. The worst thing you can feel in fantasy football is if you look at your running backs team. This happened to me with Alfred Morris all the time. I'd look in the second quarter and the Redskins would be down 17-0, and I'd think, well, there goes my game. Because Alfred Morris isn't going to catch a pass. But the Steelers can be down by 50, and Le'Veon Bell's still going to be a focus of that offense. So I would take him number 1, personally. If you take Adrian Peterson number 1, I wouldn't call you wrong either. But this isn't damning of Eddie Lacy. I mean, if you take him 1, awesome. If you take him 2, just as good. He's a top 2 or 3 guy, and I think he's the best bet to finish in the top 5. I think he's your safest top 5 bet. But Le'Veon Bell, he's just got that extra something. And outside of Eddie Lacy, there's nobody I love watching run more than Le'Veon Bell. But out of those names there, you can make your own top 10. And with a deep, deep, deep wide receiver class, you can grab one of these guys in the first round, circle back for a top-end wide receiver in round number 2. You'll still get one of those quote-unquote wide receiver 1s in round 2. As long as you're in a near normal-sized league, you shouldn't have much of a problem. So to finish up, let's look at 5 running backs I love, 5 I hate, and 5 I want you to monitor. 5 of each. And by hate, I don't mean I hate them. I'd love to go to dinner with them, but just their ranking. Their ranking is what I hate. And I'm going to do these based on the ESPN rankings. Now, these will change, but these are just a general idea of where people have them ranked on big boards. You know, when you're in your mock draft or finally in your real draft for your fantasy league, you've got that ESPN or Yahoo screen up, and you have your drop-down rankings. These are what they are. Now, 5 I love. I'll start off with Jeremy Hill at number 11. This is Jeremy Hill's team now. Gio Bernard, he's a change of pace guy. Jeremy Hill went over 1,100 yards last year for the Bengals. He is he's tough. He's powerful. He churns the legs, yards after contact. And the Bengals want to run the football. And of course they do. Andy Dalton, he's fine. He's a top 20 quarterback that will never be bad enough to lose his job completely. But he's not going to win you the games. You've got to get that running game going. The Bengals also invested heavily on the offensive line in this draft. Heavily. So you know that's going to improve. I love Jeremy Hill this year. If you can get him as the 9th or 10th running back off the board, I think you're laughing. Number 17 ranked on ESPN. And again, these are just the running back rankings, not overall. These are where they rank the running backs. Number 17, we have Melvin Gordon. I'm still a bit nervous because I feel he might try to bounce too many runs outside in the NFL. I don't think his speed will play as well as it did at Wisconsin, but Melvin Gordon, has got the potential to be a 3-down back. If Danny Woodhead's 30, is he still going to be that elite little scat guy? I don't know. But I think Melvin Gordon has a chance to be a full starting running back. And to be honest, once you get past the top 10, that's what you're looking for. You're not looking for, well, is number 16 a better running back than number 17? That's not what matters at that point, guys. What matters then is who's going to get the football more. It's about counting stats. If somebody gets 1,012 yards and somebody gets 1,010 yards, you want the guy with 1,012. Regardless of how they look on the field, it's just about numbers. It's a heartless game. It's heartless. Fantasy football is. So I think Melvin Gordon is going to get the touches. And if you get him as the 15th or so running back off the board, I think you're laughing again. I think that's great. Number 19, somebody that I have probably had on 50 fantasy teams in my life, Frank Gore. I love Frank Gore. I will never stop loving Frank Gore. If you ask me to stop loving Frank Gore, I will say no thank you. Frank Gore is an awesome running back. I don't think he has much left in the tank at all. On any other team, I'd finally give up on him. But as the 19th ranked running back on the Indianapolis Colts, that's something I'm interested in. They've got T.Y. Hilton, Kobe Fleener, Andre Johnson, Dante Moncrief out wide. They've got some weapons. They've got Andrew Luck. They've got Philip Dorsett running the deep route. I think there's going to be room for Frank Gore to run. If he's going to get 16, 18 touches a game, that could be the non-sexy pick that wins you your league. Now, Frank Gore, he's like Alfred Morris. He's not the sexy pick, but he's the guy that you can stick as your second running back or a flex, something like that. And he'll get you your 8, 10, 12, 13 points a week. It won't win you any games, but it will keep you from having those dud weeks. And that's really valuable. You get your stars, but the ones that win this for you are your 7th, 8th, 9th man on the roster. And I like Frank Gore. Number 19, I think that's great. Number 22 is Todd Gurley on the Rams. Now, I think this one's going to creep up a bit towards draft day as people get excited. But if Gurley needs to start the season on the physically unable to play list, you could make, this would be a confident pick, because you're saying, you know what? I'll get Todd Gurley right now. My team's going to be good enough for the first 5 or 6 weeks. Then Gurley will come back. If you're in a dynasty, a keeper league, Gurley is a guy to look at. He really is. When he comes back, I don't think that Jeff Fisher is going to run him into the ground this year. I think next year Todd Gurley is going to be one of the best fantasy options in all of football. Write that down right now. I really think he is. Because Jeff Fisher is not afraid to do that with a running back. But this year I think they want to ease him in. You'll still see some Trey Mason. He's a talented running back. You'll still see some of that. But at 22, if you get him anywhere near that ranking, I think you're loving that. And the next ranked guy, my 5th running back to love, TJ Yeldon of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now keep an eye on it. Make sure he looks okay through training camp. And this is another guy that people will probably overdraft, but if you can get him anywhere close to around the 15th or 20th running back off the board, if he's going to be the guy in Jacksonville, that's a nice pick. Don't forget what happened with Toby Gerhart last year, who killed some entire teams. But this offense is set to take a step forward. They can't go any further back. Last year was awful. Blake Bortles will get a little better. The offensive line, a little better. This team as a whole, a little better. If TJ Yeldon's going to get the carries, again, just like Melvin Gordon, if he's going to get the carries, get all over that. He could be a very good player on your team. Now on to the 5 players that I hate, that I actually love, but I hate their rankings. Number 7, C.J. Anderson. Now this guy is just fueling the hype machine this year. Because I'm pretty sure if you put me as Peyton Manning's running back, I'd be a top 20 fantasy option. Any of us, me, you, your dog, we'd be a top 20 fantasy back. C.J. Anderson, I keep hearing whispers here and there, but his conditioning isn't great. This isn't. Denver's running back situation, a lot like New England's, makes me nervous. Now, I remember a year or two ago, Monte Ball was just supposed to come in and take control of this. Well, he didn't. No Sean Moreno did, and he saved my fantasy season, thankfully. So I'm familiar with it from that side, but I don't want to be familiar with it from CJ Anderson's side. At number 7, you're still going to have maybe a LaShawn McCoy, DeMarco Murray, guys like that on the board. Not that I love them. But CJ Anderson, there's Ronnie Hillman there, there's Monte Ball there. This is an offense that is going to be extremely run heavy, so there will be opportunities, but I don't think he is just the 100% guaranteed year-long starter. And if you're taking a guy in the top 10 running backs, especially if you're going to take him the 7th running back, you need him to be the starter all year, every game, every carry. You can't afford for that guy to be a dud, especially with other guys on the board. So I don't like him unless he falls. Number 14, Lamar Miller of the Miami Dolphins. Now, I don't mind Lamar Miller. If he was around 20th ranked, I'd look at it, but I just have too much trust in Jay Ajayi, the rookie, 5th rounder, I think they got him, out of Boise State. Ryan Tannehill is going to make this a good offense, but I haven't seen that featured back trait from Lamar Miller, and I think it's going to turn into a bit of a timeshare. Maybe not completely 50-50, but just enough to frustrate you. I'd need Lamar Miller to fall a little bit. Number 18, Jonathan Stewart. Now, it kills me to put Jonathan Stewart on my 5 to hate list because I really love Jonathan Stewart. He has thighs that are thicker than my apartment building. They're a marvel of modern nature. And I love his running style. I loved him in college. Absolutely loved him. But I feel like this is the 15th year in a row where we're saying, this is the year for Jonathan Stewart. This is the year. Now, D'Angelo Williams has left town, but this offensive line, this is an offensive line that's going to give Michael Oher an opportunity to play left tackle. If I'm Cam Newton, I bought life insurance yesterday. I don't trust the O-line. The offense worries me a bit. And Jonathan Stewart has just shown a tendency to be injured. I hate the tag injury prone. If a guy's hurt a couple years in a row, it's a lazy tag. But Jonathan Stewart, it's happened over and over. And even when he's on the field, he's never 100%. And it breaks my heart. I wish he was, because he's talented. But at the point he's going to be drafted, I don't like him. Number 20, I've got Joique Bell, 20th ranked running back. Now that's ahead of guys like Todd Gurley, TJ Yeldon. Joique Bell. In Detroit, I think Amir Abdullah is going to cut into his carries big time. Joique Bell will be touchdown reliant. Some people love touchdown reliancy. I do not like it. Because as much as I love a 12 or an 18 on my scoreboard, I don't like a 0. And there's going to be games where Joique Bell doesn't see the field enough to impact your roster. Amir Abdullah is one talented running back. Especially in that offense. I think he can replace Reggie Bush, but younger. And they have more invested in him, so they're going to give him more opportunity. 20 for Joique Bell. I don't like it. And 26 ranked, my how the mighty have fallen, Giovanni Bernard. I'm not drafting Giovanni Bernard, period. I don't like him at 26. I don't like him at 36. Unless Jeremy Hill gets injured, knock on wood, I don't think Gio Bernard is going to do much. He, at best, would be a bye-week flex play if he really gets involved in the passing game. But with Jeremy Hill, why is Gio Bernard going to be on the field other than passing downs? Someone in your league is going to recognize the name Gio Bernard, get a bit excited, and draft him, but unless it's really late, don't let that guy be you. And let's close out quick here. We're running out of time. Went a bit longer than I thought, actually. But look at my 5 guys to monitor. And these are 5 guys to keep an eye on over the next month or two. When you see their name in an article on Twitter, open your eyes a bit, pay attention. Because these are the guys that, are you going to be the guy that's smart and drafts them? Or the guy that's stupid and passes? These are the ones, the tipping point picks. First one's number 13, Alfred Morris. A couple of weeks ago in my fantasy football nugget at the end of the show, I said to keep an eye on this because Matt Jones in training camp, for some reason, it's just like Charles Sims in Tampa Bay, hasn't done anything, wasn't great, and Matt Jones was not great for Florida in college. But the Redskins coaching staff is talking about him like this is Clinton Portis. Like this is Larry Johnson, like this is just Eric Campbell just back on earth. And I don't understand it. They're going out of their way to pump his tires. Is there something weird going on behind the scenes? Leverage against Alfred Morris? I don't know. If Alfred Morris can stay in the starting job, he's well worth being 10th, 12th, 13th running back off the board. He's not going to give you any value in the passing game, but as long as he's an early down guy, and as long as Robert Griffin III remotely resembles a human being that once played quarterback, which, can he? Hell, I don't know. But as long as he's close to a quarterback, Alfred Morris can give you something. But keep an eye on it. Is it fact or fiction, this Matt Jones stuff? I don't know. I think it's a load of something, but look at it yourself. Number 15, Carlos Hyde on the San Francisco 49ers. He's got a big opportunity. Frank Gore is out of town. Now there's Reggie Bush in the backfield with him. Kendall Hunter. He's not without competition, but he has every opportunity to step in and take a number one job on the San Francisco 49ers. I don't like the 49ers much. Don't like Colin Kaepernick. I think he's a bad quarterback, but this offensive line is strong enough. There's room for a good running game here. If Carlos Hyde can nail down that number one job, you want this guy on your roster, especially if he's the number 15 ranked running back. My third runner to monitor, Latavius Murray, number 21 of the Oakland Raiders. Now this Raiders offense, Derek Carr needs to do something this year. Everyone anoints him the savior. He's not yet. He hasn't done anything yet. But Latavius Murray, this guy is a physical specimen. He was buried behind Darren McFadden. Now can he hold off Trent Richardson? I don't know. And will he just be an early down back with Roy Halou in there for third down? I don't know. These are the things we need to figure out. But if he is going to get the bulk of the carries, if he enters the season as the starter, that's well worth the risk at number 21. You don't know if he's going to spend the year as the starter. But if you're getting around the 20th running back off the board, taking a chance on a high upside starter, that's a good move to make. Number 24 of the Falcons, Tevin Coleman. Now he is going to be competing with Freeman for carries. What I've read this week, and I get a kick out of people putting this news out already. In Atlanta, it's going to be a 50-50 timeshare. Well, how the hell do you know? It's May. It's May. Training camp hasn't happened yet. All they've done is dance around without pads on at rookie orientation. That means nothing. Rookie orientation just shows that you haven't eaten too much in the off season. Good, you're in shape, you're healthy, you're moving okay, fine. Watch it through training camp. If Tevin Coleman can even secure a 65-35 starter shift, 70-30 even, that could be big. He's a home run threat. He'll frustrate you with a couple weeks of only 4 or 5 points, but there will be those 18, 20 point weeks. And then my last guy I want you to monitor before we close up here is Joseph Randle. Now he's ranked 31 right now. There's not a chance he's ranked that low come draft day. Joseph Randle led the NFL in yards per carry last year, which is strange. You don't hear much about him. He was behind DeMarco Murray. And I'm getting sick of the argument of it was just the offensive line. Well, no, these guys are pros. Okay? And I don't care if it's the offensive line. So be it. As long as it produces a good running back for me to draft, that's great. Now, Joseph Randle is going to compete with Darren McFadden. Now, the hot take of the week is just trashing Darren McFadden. Oh, Darren McFadden has nothing. He never had any. Coming out of college, this guy was the next big thing. Now, that was 50 years ago, especially when you consider the Oakland Raiders age, every year with the Raiders ages you 5 years. But if Joseph Randle, this is just like Tevin Coleman, if he can get a 70-30 split, you'd better believe he's worth selecting. Now, he's not going to go 31st. He's going to be 15th or 20th. Because somebody in your league is going to have this, brilliant, unique idea, just independent to them. They're going to say, oh, hell, look at that O-line. I'm going to get Joseph Randle before anyone, and they're going to overdraft him. But if your league is reasonable and he comes into, if he's on your top 3 or 4 on your board, go after him. go after Joseph Randle, because I think that's a great pick. So those are my 5 love, hate, and monitor running backs. Now next week I think we'll look at some quarterbacks. We'll have our early off-season fantasy discussion with quarterbacks, and I want to go through all the positions. Then we'll have a couple weeks in the middle just to talk about the upcoming season, and then late July, early August, we'll get into some hard rankings. Okay? And we'll do that great thing people do where they make bold predictions just for the sake of making bold predictions. But we'll look at some players that are real sleepers by that point, because by then we'll know what the rankings are. Right now, this is maybe. This is maybe. But by then we'll get some real rankings for you. So as always, thank you again for listening to the podcast. Now, whether you're at the gym, whether you're in your car, whether you are laying in bed on a Saturday morning with the brown bottle flu, wherever you're listening, I do appreciate it each and every week. And again, check us out on Android, Stitcher, for Apple on iTunes. Subscribe to the podcast. You'll get it each and every week. You'll get it usually a few hours or the night before it does go up online at thebackupunter.com. So do follow along on Twitter at the Backup Punter. Like the page on Facebook. Send in your questions for next week's show. I'll be talking quarterbacks. I'll probably take a look at the fantasy football impact of Deflategate. How's that going to play out? Are you going to draft Jimmy Garoppolo first overall? Well, if it was a modeling draft, you would. Anyways, my name is Keegan Matheson here with the Backup Punter Podcast. This was episode number 10. Thank you for listening, and hopefully all of your punts stop on the 1 yard line. See you next week.